Author note. Many apologies for the massive pause in updates. I've been dedicating a lot of my time towards music stuff, and I took an away trip to Arkansas as well. It's also worth sharing that about a few months ago, I read The Langoliers by Stephen King, and the writing style got me motivated to start another story. I started another new Courage fanfic called Teresa, Before Courage Had Courage. That fanfic takes place from the first-person perspective of Teresa, Courage's mother, as she embarks on a thrilling expedition to rescue a kidnapped Courage and her sanity. Anyway, I want to continue working on both stories at the same time. I may be on break from college, but breaks definitely need breaks too. Chapter 19, To Steal from a Witch. There are 3 stones we need in order to catalyze the activation of the portal, Shirley explained. Each stone is hidden in 3 different parts of the realm. The trio was currently making their way through the series of blocks and halls of the prison. Shirley led them as she spoke. Courage limped beside Noel, who was examining his own broken arm. Fortunately, the realm is not too big, Shirley explained. It used to be vast, but that was before Devaya scrapped most of it to create the Valley of Vices. What is the Valley of Vices? Courage asked this in wonder. He was now able to think more clearly. That's the name of where we are, Shirley explained. Devias enclosed the rest of the realm within a valley. He cast a spell on the forest, making it become the Forest of Fear and Fortune. He contaminated the beautiful waters of the lake to scramble the minds of visitors, so that they could be brainwashed, manipulated, or seduced by blissful endeavors. The lake of bliss drains all sadness out through the streamline of sadness, which exists as the river. Courage noticed that after Shirley mentioned the streamline of sadness, Noel was now giving Courage a pitiful gaze. What? Courage asked him. He looked away from Courage and back down at his broken arm. This place was always miserable, Shirley continued. But Devias found ways to make it more so. Shirley stuck her arms out to acknowledge the prison corridor they were currently walking through. This prison is a factory that produces the agony and terror that Devias feeds off of. It also serves as a place to trap his prisoners and strike fear within his slaves and foes. Courage stifled another whine whenever he thought of the fate of his new friend, Daffodil. She had been enslaved by Devias her entire life, and she wanted to know what it was like to be free. But now she'd never find out. Or, maybe she is finally free? Yes. Courage would rely on this comforting thought as long as she remained within his heart. A place as evil as this would have been an immediate target for the Thormagai, Shirley continued. Well, back when we still could have stopped him. This prison was hidden in the realm of emptiness underneath the rocks and soil of the Valley of Vices. It was kept secret from the Thormagai long ago, before Devias had too much power. He knew we'd expect a grand prison to be in the realm of the dead, or somewhere dark and sadistic, but that snake cleverly hid it here to mask its atrocities away from everything else. The realm of the dead already acted as a prison itself, but Devias secretly created this one specifically as a last stop for the living before their eternal sentencing in the afterlife. But by the time we found out about this place, he had already grown too powerful. Shirley stopped for a moment to take a deep breath. Courage and Noel both looked over at her whenever she continued. So, we need 3 stones, black tourmaline, labradorite, and amethyst. I bet we could find all kinds of stones within the major areas of the valley. Since we are closest to the village, we'll start there. An alarm sounded in Courage's head upon the mention of the village. Ah! Courage started. What? Shirley asked. I know it's dangerous, and I know that you lost a good friend there, but there is nothing we can do. And we have no choice but to hurry before Devias wakes back up. I was able to sedate him very minimally and temporarily due to his unmatched power. So we've got to move. Courage felt Noel pat him on the back. All right, then let's get to work, Courage said with newfound courage. 000. After a seemingly endless number of halls and corridors, the trio finally found a set of ascending stairs. A dim, blue light shone down the stairs, matching the color of the rest of the realm. All 3 of the dogs knew that this must have been the traditional entrance exit. Shirley had led them through the halls, and she acted like she knew exactly where they were at all times. Courage tried to look for variation in each hall, but they all looked the same to him. Shirley is one strange person, Courage said in his mind. The thought always struck him every time he came to visit her, but it never spoke to him quite this way since he first met her. And that was when Eustace hired her to channel through to his dead brother, Horace, so that he could tell Eustace where he hid the key to his fortune. Needless to say, Shirley was successful in channeling Horace, but it's also needless to say that Eustace found an unhappy ending. It didn't take long for the trio to fully ascend up the stairs and back into the vast, grey desert of the realm. Courage thought the prison was buried much deeper than it was. But he supposed that if it was hidden way out in the metaphorical middle of nowhere and in a realm that was dominated by a malevolent force, then there would be little need to hide it better. Way out there is the village, Shirley said. Both Courage and Noel focused their vision towards where Shirley was pointing, and they saw a bunch of little dome-like shapes way out on the horizon. So we've got to hurry. They started running as fast as they could towards the shapes on the horizon. Much to Courage's dismay, these shapes didn't seem to get any bigger. Trip! Thud! Ouch! Courage exclaimed in pain as he tripped and fell. He had accidentally grabbed onto Noel's ankle, causing him to tumble down to the ground as well. Oh, hey! Noel barked at Courage. What did you do that for? I could have landed on my mangled arm. Sorry. Courage chuckled. Oh, do you think hurting me is funny? Noel spat. I guess hurting me has always been funny, hasn't it? Noel's upsetting words worried Courage. Noel, Courage tried to say. You don't have to defend your case, Noel said pitifully. Because you hurt me for your own selfish, doggy amusement, I know for sure that you are no imposter Courage this time. You are the real Courage I'm with right now. But, Noel, Courage tried to say again. No buts Courage, Noel spat. I'm tired, and I just want to move on from this. Just next time you want to hurt me, hurt Shirley. She's a dog, too, after all. Maybe it'll help quench your sick satisfaction. It wasn't until Noel mentioned Shirley that Courage realized that she was missing. Where is she anyway? Courage asked. Where is her, or crap? Noel exclaimed. Now we've lost Shirley, and I'm stuck out here with someone who wants to hurt me. Hey, come on. Courage argued. He was growing angrier by the second since Noel's sudden outburst. It was an accident, you moron. What happened to the Noel that saved me, the Noel that cried on me, the Noel that comforted me? Trust me, you are very much still talking to him right now, Shirley had said. Her voice came from Courage's left. Noel's blue face turned into a sickening mixture of pale and red after Shirley said those words. But much to Noel's pleasure, Courage was too focused on Shirley's reappearance to notice. Shirley! Courage exclaimed before hugging her. Where did you go? Me, I didn't go anywhere, Shirley said as she pulled Courage's arms off of her. It was you two dum-dums that took off running wherever my finger pointed. You dogs are mucho loco. And you two ran off before I could tell you about the easier way to get there. Snap! Thurp! Whoa! Courage exclaimed upon setting eyes on the same dome buildings he had visited before. Wow! How did you do that? Noel asked in wonder. Shirley just smiled before saying, follow me. Courage was still upset with Noel's unreasonable hostility. Didn't he know that it was an accident? Surely he didn't actually think Courage was here to harm him. Maybe he was overreacting because he got hurt from the fall and it made him mad. Courage's thoughts eventually dissipated as his thoughts returned to what was all around them. The three dogs traversed through the filthy, dome village. People, animals, and unidentifiable creatures scampered around the pathways, covered in all kinds of filth. With Shirley here, it seemed almost safe to walk through such a dangerous place. Courage kept his eye scanning around for any signs of his chase from earlier. But what he was hoping he'd find was where his friend, Daffodil, had perished. Courage kept his eyes fixed on the ground to try to find a glimpse of a worm trail, or something. Courage, I didn't mean to, Noelle started to say, noticing Courage staring at the ground. Noelle actually thought Courage was staring at the ground, about to cry because of the outburst from earlier. I didn't mean to flip out on you earlier, Noelle finished. I guess you're right after all. I bottle up my emotions and they end up exploding like a soda bottle. No, Noelle. I didn't think too much of it, Courage lied before he could stop himself. He thought about amending what he had said, but decided that he would look like a jerk if he did. What's really on my mind right now is my friend who. Yeah. The concept of death was still far too scary for Courage, even after all he had witnessed in that godforsaken prison. She must have been quite the companion, Noelle said sadly. These words stabbed Courage right in his choked-up throat. And so are you. Courage's heart nearly skipped a beat. Noelle, you made an honest mistake, but that does not make you a bad friend. Take a look at me, for example. I locked you in a frigging barn and was gonna leave you there all night. You were justified in doing so, though. Noelle argued. I was a bad friend. Well, I guess you could say we weren't friends yet. So how could you be a bad friend if you weren't my friend yet? Courage calmly countered. This seemed to stump Noelle for a little bit before he was able to come up with a counter-argument to Courage's counter-argument. I mean, we were acquaintances, Noelle reasoned. We were acquaintances, and I walked all over you. Even when you wouldn't fight back, I still didn't care about you to stop. But then you eventually did, Shirley piped in with a smile. I'm not talking to you. He yelled at Shirley. Noelle, you cared about me, even after I deliberately did something very despicable to you. Now, why wouldn't I care about you if you did the same to me? Courage asked on point. Noelle was clearly flustered. Courage finally noticed Noelle's red face for what seemed like the first time. He honestly thought it was adorable how embarrassed and panicked Noelle seemed. But as much as Courage wanted to keep embarrassing him, he decided that he'd relent for Noelle's sake. Anyways, Courage turned his head back to Shirley. How much longer until we get to the... There, Shirley interrupted Courage. She pointed to a little shack that was kept separate from the domes. The shack looked like what Courage would imagine a witch's house would look like. He half expected to see the Stitch sisters come walking out with their quilt, or with a spellbook or something. The black tourmaline stone is kept inside the house, Shirley explained. I'd ask the two of you to hide while I go and retrieve the stone, but unfortunately, I may require as much help as I can get. Shirley's warning shook Courage. What do you mean? What kind of help? What could we possibly do to help you? Courage was practically babbling at this point. I need you guys to hold on to me to ensure that I don't get sucked in, Shirley explained. Courage was more confused now, but it was Noelle who asked the next question. Sucked into what? Her cauldron, Shirley explained. That's all you need to know. Just hold on to me while I seize the stone. If the hag isn't there, then we should survive. And if she's there? Courage shook at the fact that his fear of this being a witch's house was correct. Again, I have told you everything you need to know, Shirley replied mercilessly. Now let's go. We are running out of time. Shirley led the way up the small hill while the two dogs treaded side by side behind her. Courage had never heard Shirley yell so urgently, and he wasted no time obeying her. However, her urgency rang heavy on his nerves. Courage's teeth were chattering, and he saw that Noelle looked like he was about to topple over and puke. Creak! Before Courage even knew it, they were already in front of the house and opening the door. The strong odors of mildew and burnt hair filled Courage's nostrils. It felt strangely musty and damp inside the house, which was a stark contrast to the dry, desert-like conditions outside. The moistness would have felt welcoming, but everything about this house just felt wrong. In the house's only room, Courage caught sight of rotten, severed body parts of both animals and people, which hung from hooks, or were stapled to the walls. There were dozens of dishes and weird utensils. Courage preferred not to know the purposes such things could serve. There were many bottles and flasks that contained unknown substances and creatures. But what caught Courage's eye the most was the giant, black cauldron in the middle of the room. It was partially stained with every color imaginable. It reminded Courage of the time that Eustace was repainting the trim in the dining room. Muriel wanted a large selection of options to choose from, so they brought in almost every shade of every color of the rainbow of paint, it seemed. But when Courage failed to hold the ladder for Eustace, he fell, and all of the different colors of paint splattered everywhere. Most of the paint ended up on the black wood-burning stove, and the juxtaposition of the black metal and the bright colors was unlike anything Courage had ever seen. But after Eustace had beaten him for being a stupid dog, the sight of messy colors on a black surface had forever scarred Courage to associate it with uneasy apprehension of what's about to happen. And after laying eyes on the cauldron, it was almost too much for Courage to bear. Courage had swiftly slid right behind Noel and held onto him. His chattering teeth and shaking body shook Noel's body too. "Courage, let go of me," Noel harshly whispered, trying to elbow the anxious pup out from behind him. "Shush!" Shirley had shushed Noel with a paw over his mouth. Courage then anxiously put his paws over Noel's mouth, too. "It doesn't seem like she's here, but we cannot let our guard down," Shirley warned before removing her paw. "Now, each of you grab onto my ankles." Noel, who was thoroughly annoyed with the cowardly pup shushing him from behind, pried Courage's paws off of his mouth and then turned around to face him. Courage swiftly placed his paws onto his closed eyes and was still shaking uncontrollably. "Courage, we've got to hold on to Shirley," Noel tried to reason with Courage. "And we've got to hurry before it's too late." Courage would not budge. "Hey, what's taking so long?" Shirley's voice came from inside the cauldron, as she was already ducking her head inside. Noel sighed, before grabbing onto both of Shirley's ankles all by himself. He didn't really see any threat, and he figured that if Courage wasn't going to do anything, then he'd just grab onto her ankles himself. "Ready," Noel confirmed to Shirley. "Okay, hold on tight," Shirley said before ducking further. Noel grimaced, because Shirley's legs were just as thin as her arms, and he worried that his grip was hurting her. "Are you okay?" Noel asked Shirley. "Just a little further and I've got it, now don't let up," Shirley groaned. Through weightlessness, utter weightlessness. Noel was caught by complete surprise when he was nauseously yanked off his feet and straight into the black cauldron upside down. He tightened his grip on Shirley when he noticed a green glow from somewhere beyond her head. The howling of the air rushing all around them was deafening. The only things keeping Noel and Shirley from getting sucked into the green thing were Noel's legs wrapped around the edges of the cauldron. Shirley was deathly still and made no sound, as her head may have already made contact with the green thing. "Courage! Help us!" Noel screamed loudly. After nothing seemed to happen, Noel continued to scream and scream and scream. Ugh! Ugh! Courage felt the air rustle his fur as he kept his eyes glued shut. He heard Eustace's threats echo around in his ears. "Stupid dog!" Eustace screamed at him in pain after the fall. "You don't ever do nothing right. I don't know what Muriel sees in you, but to me, you're just a big, stupid, smelly, worthless dog. Ah! You're the useless one." Courage whined as tears rolled down his muzzle, and he could hear Noel screaming in the background. But then he heard something else that captured his attention. Courage! Courage! Help! Muriel screamed. Courage's eyes shot open. He caught sight of two little blue legs, wrapped around the rim of the cauldron he heard Muriel's voice from. Courage was suddenly back in reality, and he realized that Noel and Shirley were in desperate need of his help. In a shade of jittery panic, Courage sprang over and grabbed onto Noel's legs just as soon as they let go of the cauldron. Courage had to dig his own legs into the floor under the cauldron to generate enough counterforce to keep them from getting sucked into whatever it was they were about to get sucked into. "Courage! You're almost there, dear. Keep kicking." Muriel's screams continued to echo loudly from the cauldron. Courage gave one last mighty tug, which landed him on his back. Noel slammed over Courage, and he ended up on his back as well. The force that had been trying to suck them into the green, glowy thing, had relented. And whenever Courage's vision cleared, he realized that Noel's legs were toppled over his face, and that his rear end was resting on top of Courage's head. "Oh! Get your butt out of my face!" Courage exclaimed in disgust. "Shirley!" Noel exclaimed. Both dogs froze for half a second. "Shirley!" They both screamed in unison. As they were both frantically trying to get up, they kept tripping over each other and toppling back over. "Go that way! Move your legs! Move your legs so that I can move mine!" Noel yelled at Courage. "I'll go this way. You go that way. And move your arm so that I can move my neck." Courage yelled at Noel. By the time both of the dogs were able to stand again, they realized that Shirley had been standing on the other side of the cauldron the whole time, completely calm and in seemingly good health. "Come look, you idiots," Shirley said quietly. As both dogs huddled around her, they saw that she had what looked almost like a piece of smooth, partially burnt charcoal. "That's it?" Courage asked. "Yes," Shirley confirmed. "I've seen prettier versions of this same kind of stone, but this is all we have to work with." "I mean, are you sure that isn't just a piece of charcoal or something?" Noel asked. "Either way, it better not be, because we have to go," Shirley said briefly, before putting the black rock somewhere in her cloak. Just after the trio exited the house, Courage saw what he thought was an airplane, or helicopter, or something. It was in the sky, and he swore he could hear some sort of soaring sound. "Get down!" Shirley shouted before pulling the two dogs down under a small, nearby ledge. Both Courage and Noel knew that they had best be quiet and still. If Shirley was alarmed, then they better be too. "Shook!" Courage flinched, which prompted Shirley to tighten her grip around him. Even though he shook in terror, Shirley's powerful grip had kept him from shaking hardly at all. How she had this much strength, Courage would never know. The sound they heard sounded like a large object had just been shot from the sky and made impact with the ground right in front of the house. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The unmistakable sounds of uneven footsteps got louder and louder and faster and faster. This unidentified person was headed right for their hiding spot. Shirley had tightened her grip even more on the two dogs, and then she pulled all three of them as far back into the ledge as she could. As the footsteps grew louder and louder, a small shadow appeared in front of them, and it was swiftly growing in size. As the shadow got bigger and bigger, Courage started hearing the faint sounds of labored breathing. Just when the shadow couldn't grow any larger, the owner of the breaths and footsteps was no doubt standing on top of the ledge over them. Courage was able to make out a large, Eustace-like chin, and a wickedly crooked hat. The witch was here. Pulk, pulk, pulk. Courage turned his head, and watched as some of the grey soil he was propped up against started caving in, and creating dozens of small holes. Out came these little black claws, before the tails and bodies. There were scorpions everywhere. Courage had to clutch his own mouth to keep himself from screaming. He bit his tongue extra hard after a scorpion had made its way onto his waist. Then, whenever he turned his head to face it, he almost headbutted another scorpion that had found its way onto his shoulder, without him even noticing. Because the witch refused to go away, Courage had no choice but to grit his teeth, remain deathly still, close his eyes, and just pray that he didn't get caught, stung, or worse. It was very silent now. It's almost like the witch knew that they were there. The legs of the scorpions poked all around Courage's body. He felt as if the one on his waist was joined by at least 3 or 4 more. One of them proceeded to climb onto his belly, while another made its way to his tail. The one on his shoulder had climbed up and rested on the side of his neck. Courage was clenched so tightly, anticipating a painful sting from one of these places. The needle-like legs, digging into his fur. Digging into his flesh. Courage almost wished that the witch would catch them, just so that he could escape from these pests. Hark! Put! A small, black splatter suddenly splattered onto Noel's left ankle. He swiftly clutched his leg in pain, and then Shirley clamped her paw over his mouth and slammed his head back against the ledge wall. Crunch! Shirley let out a soft groan after regaining control of Noel, who was still squirming in pain. Just before Courage thought they were busted for good, the footsteps were heard shifting backward, before heading away from the ledge and back towards the house. And as the witch trudged away, her shadow grew smaller and smaller. Once Courage felt the scorpions leave his body, he felt brave enough to look around again. The witch's shadow had vanished, and the scorpions were all digging back into the ground and quickly retreating. Courage then set eyes on his other two friends. Shirley had finally let go of both Courage and Noel. Noel immediately reached down onto his leg and touched the black spot. "Don't touch it!" Shirley groaned, pulling a smooshed scorpion out of her arm. Courage cringed, as he now knew what that crunched sound was and why Shirley had groaned so painfully. "What do you want me to do about it?" Noel quickly babbled out in pain. Shirley calmly formed a triangle with her paws, and then positioned the shape straight into the sky. At the exact same time, a purple outline had formed around the black spot. As Shirley shot her arms upward, the black spot seemed to vanish, leaving behind a faint, purple cloud that quickly dissipated. It almost reminded Courage of the swindling wind Shirley had cursed Eustace and Muriel with a long time ago. Noel groaned as he stared down at where the witch had hawked a disgusting, black loogie onto his leg. Where the black spot just now existed was a gross-looking wound. It luckily didn't bleed and wasn't very big, but it was enough to leave a bald spot in his fur and to burn his skin badly. "Jesus!" Noel exclaimed. "Look what she did to me." "You're lucky she didn't know you were there," Shirley pointed out. "Really? I think she knew we were there, and I find it messed up that she spat on me, and not any of you too. I take personal offense to this." "Calm down, you'll heal before we return to our realm," Shirley explained. "Healing's slower in our realm for some reason, but it is faster here." "Why do you think Courage healed so fast?" "And your arm?" Courage examined his neck while Noel examined his arm. "We really need to leave," Shirley said urgently after a long sigh. After Courage helped Noel stand back up, he noticed that Shirley was pointing to the right of them. Before Courage could look, snap! Thurp! Shirley had moved them again. They seemed to be now standing about 3 football fields away from a forest of some sort. Courage assumed that this was the cursed forest he had come across Fusili, and among other things, in. He decided that he would never tell Noel about the phantom version of himself. "Hag spit, it is very acidic," Shirley continued explaining to Noel. "Many different potions and poisons have been made with hag spit. Hags are pretty much fallen thaumagai. They are thaumagai who have either quit, failed, or become corrupt. Their bodies start to rot, just like their hearts and souls. The process is irreversible, but we'd experiment on the hags to try to find a cure. We usually kept them all locked away, until we could help them or kill them, but you-know-who had to go and free them all." Shirley stopped walking and grabbed onto both Courage and Noel again. "I cannot express to you how dangerously powerful Device is." Shirley stared directly into Courage's eyes as she said this. Courage felt her eyes shoot her warning through his own and straight into his soul. It chilled him to his very core. "We tried searching and synthesizing a cure for hagism for centuries." Shirley now stared over at Noel. It was a goal sought after by the thaumagai and all of the keepers since what seemed like the beginning of time. And Device was able to easily take control of all of them with just his mind. Shirley stopped for a moment before continuing again. "If we survive this place, I truly think you both need to reconsider this quest for Noel's parents. Device's reign of terror in our realm may not begin until long after you both live your full lives. So, you guys have a choice." Courage shot a brief glance over at Noel, who still remained fixed on Shirley's stare. Shirley then shifted her stare towards both of them simultaneously before continuing. You two can dive headfirst into a horrifyingly deadly journey that will include venturing into places deadlier than this, and without my presence. You two can find ugly answers, tinker with forces that may catalyze Devias's reign of terror, and get everyone killed, and you yourselves die in an unimaginably gruesome way. Or you two could live long lives together, live knowing that there's nothing you can do for Noelle's parents, and live not having to worry about Devias killing anyone you love. Courage glanced back over at Noelle, who was already glancing at him grimly. Courage looked away, and bit his lip. Think about it, Shirley said. You are some of the bravest dogs I've ever met, and I will support whatever decision you guys make. Now let's go. Shirley briefly turned back around and began walking. Something Shirley said struck Courage in a weird way. She mentioned never having to worry about Devias killing anyone Courage loved, but who was she to know who all he really loved? As far as Courage knew, Devias was already responsible for multiple past occurrences that caused tremendous suffering to ones he loved. In fact, just about everybody he loved had been harmed by Devias already. Devias was directly responsible for some of the encounters on the farm long ago, such as Fusili and the Stitch sisters. Devias was the one who had captured Noelle. Hello. Isn't that why they were here in the first place? They were here to rescue Noelle. Devias had forced his way into their lives, not them into Devias's. Well, they kinda did set out for Noelle's parents right before it happened, didn't they? Maybe. Maybe if they just mourned Noelle's parents like they died, similar to how Courage? No. They may still be alive. If only Courage could build a rocket or something. But would he want to see them if they? No. Shirley briefly turned her head back and shot Courage a pitiful glance before turning back around. Courage forgot that Shirley could hear his thoughts. And here he was dogging on her and having his own private thoughts. He's got to keep his thoughts under control around her because of her intrusive abilities. But before he could think too much more about that, he noticed that they now walked underneath the tall, evergreen trees of the forest. And they soon caught sight of a small downward hill. Courage thought the hill was familiar as he noticed how foggy it was downhill. This was the stream, and there was no doubt about it. End of chapter. Author note: I really wanted to get much farther in this chapter, but it was already fairly long. I do want to say that we're not too far from college starting up again, but I want to finish this arc before I head back. So live on with the expectation that more chapters are heading this way. Also, it's worth noting that I used a very vague pronoun reference whenever Courage and Noelle took off running without Shirley, to create the illusion that Shirley ran with them. I am not a fan of deliberately using grammatical errors, but I did so for storytelling's sake. And yes, like a ton of other works of art, I did steal that scene from The Lord of the Rings when the hobbits were hiding under the tree from a ringwraith, and there were a bunch of bugs crawling around on them. This time, it was Courage, Shirley, and Noelle hiding from a witch under a ledge, and they got covered in black scorpions.